and thank you for joining our webinar, The Case for Putting ServiceNow at the Center of Your OT Strategy. We have some great content up ahead, so time to meet the team. We have ServiceNow representing with us, as well as two from our team. So Fritz, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, good morning, and a really good early morning to some of you I know who are watching. So my name's Fritz Byam. I'm the CEO here at ITS Partners, and we're all things ServiceNow, but I actually started my career in manufacturing. I got about 15 years in. So I've done almost every job from engineering, materials management, got to be the midnight A-shift supervisor, ultimately ended up running a big manufacturing department for Unilever, and then got to try my hand at supply chain management. So at least from that practitioner standpoint of manufacturing, I feel like I've got that covered. And I know on the ServiceNow side and also with the relationship, James has got that covered. So James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. My name is James Burson. I am the practice director for OT here at ITS. Yeah, I mean, I've been working with the platform for, where are we now? 11 years since 2012. A long time, right? Surprises myself sometimes. But I also started sort of in IT, in non-traditional IT environments a long time ago in the 90s and then early 2000s, right? Almost 15 years in what I call non-traditional IT environments. So field service, IT operations in distributed locations, all across the country and actually some international activity as well. Right. And so while I've sent people in, I've gone into all sorts of facilities, manufacturing and otherwise, to find and fix technology problems, and then have since transitioned here, as we said, to helping use ServiceNow to support a lot of that activity. So happy to be here with you guys, and we're looking forward to the conversation. Jamie, I'm going to pass it over to you here.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Marcial. I'm the Technology Workflows Manager supporting the manufacturing Northeast space. I've been with ServiceNow for 3 years now. Prior to supporting the manufacturing vertical, I was supporting basically the eastern seaboard of the U.S. commercial space. So I say that to say that in the 3 years that I've been with ServiceNow, I've seen a lot of our customers move over to the platform for various reasons, and have also experienced what I'm seeing as a IT and OT convergence, which is really the purpose for this webinar today. So before I pass it over to Rob and the team, I just want to say thank you to the ITS team for taking time out of their day to help us jointly deliver this webinar. We have a jam-packed video presentation for you all, and we're really excited to deliver it. Rob?
That's awesome. No, yeah, again, I've shared Jamie's thoughts. Thanks, ITS, for having us aboard. Name's Robert Rash. I am the Outbound Product Management Director for our OTM line of products here at ServiceNow. Been here a couple years, been working in the industrial OT space for about the past 25, if I have to date myself a little bit. And just about had the pleasure of working in just about every vertical within that space, power, utilities, oil and gas, pharma, the list goes on, mainly as an automation engineer and a programmer, but also working in that OT security space. So again, thanks ITS for having us, and I'm very excited to talk to everybody today.
All right. Well, thanks, Rob, and thanks, team. Look, this really is a better together story. It's all about, ServiceNow and a partner, and also it's also about some discovery and security tools in the OT space. And so let me talk just real briefly about ITS. Look, we're a ServiceNow elite partner, and one of the things we're really strong in is we're a technology partner for several of the OT discovery and security providers. That means we've done the integrations to ServiceNow. We'll talk about that later. We really think of ourselves as a team of special forces. We don't do everything, right? We're very focused on the space that we're practitioners in, and that's around a lot of the core workloads in ServiceNow related to discovery, the CMDB, asset management, and now OT and some of the more operationally aligned practices. We're US based, and look, we're actual practitioners. If we have a practice around IT asset management, it's because we have people that have been in the industry and have actually done the job. The same thing for OT. So that's an important kind of cornerstone of our business is we're practitioner led. Now, as we talk about OT, and I think we were going to hit on a lot of this today, success really requires teamwork, right? It can't be ServiceNow in a silo and a partner in a silo, and it can't be maybe your customer's CISO in a silo and the plant manager in a silo. It's teamwork, because it takes, to really do it well, it's going to take the platform, expertise on the platform, an understanding of those security or discovery tools, and then putting it all together. What's the story? How do you get alignment? Manufacturing practitioner knowledge. So we're going to start, Rob's going to start by talking about the ServiceNow platform. Rob?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. In order to understand what kind of the direction that ServiceNow went in, so I guess we'll have a little bit of a history lesson, tell you how we got here, right? And to do that, I want to share with you our thoughts around the challenges that we've seen talking to customers in the industrial space, and obviously things I've learned from my few years in it, right? Typically that manufacturing space has been a very manual churn, right? It's very slow to adapt technology, right? And change just doesn't happen too often. We kind of are earmark as we see about, it's 10 years behind what the technology advancements that we see within IT, right? But that's obviously changing, right? We've heard of Industry 4.0, we see the news and that sort of thing. So if you think in consideration of, the security threats that we see in front of us, some of the geopolitical climate and that sort of thing, we have to, we say we have to be more agile, right? But also have to be more, efficient, trying to address those risks around, the changes that we see within that climate. Right? We have to really turn on a dime, if a supply chain incident happens, or we have an issue on the plant floor, that sort of thing. And so it's a very new environment that we've seen within the past 5 to 10 years within the plant space, right? So the industrial technology complex, they haven't been short to disappoint in some of the advancements that we see with ERP and MES systems, IoT enablement, right? We see all these connected systems, telling us things are wrong, right? But we still have the core issue, the challenges that we see in front of us. You have all these great processes and these great technologies in front of us that we can leverage within the platform, but they're still pretty disconnected, right? And then obviously none of them are designed to talk to each other, right? SCADA systems, PLC systems, HMIs, MES, ERP systems, they all do one thing and do one thing great, but they don't integrate with with other platforms and systems, right? So we have this siloed insights, that we're faced with within the plant floor. If you go into a plant manager's office, right, you'll see 15 screens there. The poor guy's in a swivel chair or roller skates trying to manage building and EMS and ERP and SCADA and that sort of thing, right? It creates a very big hole in terms of that lack of visibility and that those disconnected systems. The lack of visibility thing is one thing that our customers bring up more often than not, right? And obviously, if they're putting on their security lens, if you will, right? You can't secure, we always say that, right? Well, you can't secure what you can't see, but also that poses a lot of other challenges within the plant floor, right? That, you need that core visibility and that inventory just to carry out day-to-day operations, right? Now, oftentimes we run into customers that either exist in Sam's head because he's been at the plant for 38 years, or if they've gotten very advanced within the past few years, they have a nice Excel spreadsheet where they're trying to manage that inventory and get their arms around what they actually have within their plant floor. When we talk about the OT landscape and why we did what we did, we have IT and OT there on the right with our Purdue model, right? We've traditionally addressed the IT landscape, right? Our servers and containers, firewall and network systems and that sort of thing. And we provide visibility to customers for that, and playbooks and remediations and ways to secure that landscape and that sort of thing. And we wanted to get into the OT side of the house, right? When we say OT, as our Purdue model depicts, right? We're talking down to the level 0 processes, right? Because in all those systems, right? We can't, we can't. I think Jamie brought up the IT and OT convergence, right? We're starting to see a lot more connected systems within the plant floor to the internet. I think recently, within this past year or two, the industrial and manufacturing space has become the #1 attacked surface for hackers and from a cybersecurity perspective, right? So we can't go on with that that methodology of I have my IT space, not manage that, and there's the OT space, and we'll let those guys handle that on their own. Right? That's just not reality. So what we wanted to do is, right, we wanted to leverage the ability for customers to manage their OT space in a way that they do their IT space, right? You know, taking consideration of those challenges, right, that, you know, Chris brought up around discovery and that sort of thing, right? But still leverage what they've done well in terms of that incident response plan and the visibility and, you know, the context around what they own, but being able, again, you know, not to reinvent the wheel, right? There's no reason that they should, you know, have to do that just because, you know, this device doesn't have carpet on it. The other big challenge, if you kind of look at the, you know, my little plant diagram there, and this is one of the biggest differentiators between that IT and OT space, right? If you look at the HMI, for example, there in the middle of the screen, if that was a traditional PC or a workstation or laptop within the IT space, right? We, you know, if there was an incident there, we could take that HMI out of service, that laptop, and carry out remediation. We could contain a threat if it's a security incident, you know, go on about our day, put it back into service. Within a plant environment, right? Obviously, if you kind of look at that, you know, that HMI operates within an orchestra, right? We can't just take that HMI out of service and expect that not to impact the rest of our plant environment, right? There's other things that needs to be done. We have to maybe shut down that scanner. We have to make sure the area is safe, you know, that people are removed from the area. We have to properly shut down equipment. There's a whole host of things within that plant floor environment that needs to be carried out before we can just start that simple task of running a playbook and carrying out those remediations. So there's dependencies there, right? So, you know, we have to take in mind that context in terms of, if I shut this HMI down, right, what else needs to be attended to? How much is that going to cost me from a production standpoint? You know, is this something that, you know, can I take this HMI out and, you know, service it, and can it be started back up and we return to operations in a couple of minutes, or is that a few hours of operation, right? So there's a ton of more context that we need and information that we need within the plant power environment, within that operational environment, that we really didn't necessarily need within that IT environment. So we've taken all those considerations, right, in terms of that context, right? How much more information do we need from a remediation standpoint to carry out those playbooks and those remediation steps on the plant floor and then in that OT environment than we do with the operational or IT environment? So that's where we want to position ourselves from a product standpoint, is that system of action, right? We've taken what we've done well, right, in terms of, you know, taking all these different points and, you know, again, Prince mentioned, you know, all these integrations that IPS has built with the, you know, different service providers and that sort of thing. No different than IT, and prioritize these things based on that context that we provide and carry it, be really that system of action, right? That's kind of the idea. So what we've done, this is not a new environment for us, right? We've taken what we're experts in terms of visibility, in terms of security and remediation management, in terms of playbooking and just fixing service issues. And we purpose built those products for OT, you know, taking consideration those customer challenges around visibility and those siloed environments, and, you know, how difficult it is to actually figure out what your landscape looks like within that plant floor environment. Again, purpose building those solutions to come up with what we call OT visibility, OT vulnerability response, and OT service management. So the way that this is kind of depicts a maturity model, or, you know, that kind of journey that customers go through within the shop floor, right? The intention is, first, you have to have that CMDB, right? You have to have population of your OT assets and a trusted source of that assets, right? And not only the assets themselves, but again, that context around it. What does this device do? Where does it live within my network? What piece of equipment or process or line or area does it support? You know, what's its business impact to me if I take it out of service, right? What else needs to be shut down? Is it a safe environment? Is it part of critical data? Is it part of equipment or personnel safety, right? We add that tons of context around just that piece of asset that's within my CMDB, with the intent that we can take that information and now we can start to prioritize how we're going to respond to those vulnerabilities with OTVR response or security incidents, or how we're going to respond and prioritize those events from a service management perspective. You know, if I have a pump blow up within my plant, or if I have a belt break or that sort of thing, how do I prioritize those things? And how do I make the most out of my system to make sure that I'm not taking a 7-hour task and, you know, turn it into a 2-week task, right? The intent when we're going through this maturity model, right, is to provide you enough context to reduce that mean time between repair and narrow down that remediation effort. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to let James show you the cool part of what we built. And James, take it away, sir.
All right, hey everybody again. So we want to start frankly, with a practical story that I think a lot of people are going to recognize. I want you guys to meet Jerry. Jerry has been recently transferred across the state and and promoted to production manager of a small manufacturing facility located in the Bronx. As part of this promotion, he's backfilling for the previous manager, a guy named Bill, who retired, and Jerry's trying to figure out what he needs to know about his new facility. So he does all the things you would expect. He gets a tour of his buildings. He meets with the shift leaders. He starts looking at the stuff, the systems, the files that Bill put together. What we get is, and the same thing we see a lot from certainly a lot of the organizations we talk to, but it totally makes a lot of sense, right? Bill had been in the Bronx for a long, long time. He knew his floor. He knew how it all worked together. He'd been there for a long time. He'd set up some of it entirely on his own. And while Jerry has seen pieces of this for his old plant, a bunch of this is entirely new for him, right? And so what is the situation here, right? This is one of those risks that a lot of organizations are facing, a place where older workers are retiring. We would start losing institutional knowledge of where and what is going on in their organization, inside that plant, on those individual lines, right? We lose knowing where the quirks are, where the temperamental devices are, what the history of repair has probably been, stuff that Bill just knew. He just knew that like last September, he got and fixed something, right? And not something that's necessarily tracked in these systems. Every time we replace something new, something old with something new, or we reconfigure a line to add some new activity, right? All of these changes, all of these variations become more difficult to keep up with, right? And so I guess we want to talk about here for a little bit of how does ServiceNow help you bring this journey to the start of your organization here, right? Some of you have been familiar with ServiceNow, of course, right? So this is actually what we call the manufacturing workspace. It's available up here in the workspaces. Then I'm logged in as Jerry, right? So you can see it's supposed to be a nice welcome space. The workspaces that come in various parts of the platform are really built around the idea of helping to streamline activities for folks who need to use them in different spaces. There's a number of different workspaces available. This one here is the manufacturing workspace. We're going to walk our way through some of these things. What you can see here is I'm just on the main dashboard, and I can see that right now I've got 2 buildings here at the Bronx, and when I switch around, I see different device sets will load up. I can see different information available to me, and depending on the level of setup that's being done, all right, the level of information that you have built into the system. So like here over on building 1, right, again, I can see my total count of assets. I can see where the vulnerability scores are coming in at, right? What my vulnerable items and how to respond to things. But I can also look at quick ways of seeing my OT assets by the kind of category. If I'm trying to figure out certain kinds of information, or even just so I have a good sense of what my inventory looks like, right? This manufacturing workspace really gives us a strong opportunity to say, hey, listen, I'm pulled in all of the information that I had, but how do I make sense of it, right? And when I can say, hey, listen, I know I have, a bunch of these things that don't have criticality yet, so that's an activity I'm going to want to go do and set eventually, so that I can know when a specific item goes offline, to Rob's point, we can make a much better judgment call at a systematic level to say, oh, that's a super critical piece of hardware. I can see that because I've already set that value. I know what I've got going on, versus having to go through a system of like sort of playing guesses. Well, it's one of the 9 switches somewhere out there. Let's go figure out which one it is, kind of thing, right? Or just sort of absolutely knowing, well, I always put 109 in the corner, right? You get a lot of opportunities there. Now, this is the part of the friendly view, so to speak, right? But when we really want to dive into the details, right, this is one of the other views that's present, just part of the list view process, right? And you can see there's a whole bunch of other things. Some of it ties to the stuff we had on the front of the dashboard, but I can see all of my assets, right? I can break them down by category. But as we said before, right, some of this is some of the real power here on the platform is by the ability to condense multiple data sources onto this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go add a value here that is actually the discovery source. right? It's one of the values that comes up in the system here. And I'm going to go move this up a little bit. We'll put it up here in front of Purdue level. So it's on the first part of the screen. And you can see now that as even just right here in this first bit, right, I have multiple different security tools helping me provide information into the CMDB through the use of the service graph connectors. Now, some of you have not heard a lot about this, right? Service graph connectors are one of the functions that ServiceNow has out here to help us bring in data sets from the separate tools. It's part of this platform of platform strategy. You probably heard some about, right? The idea is we want to be there to connect multiple platforms so that you can actually turn this stuff into a system of action and understand what you're getting to, right? But I can do all sorts of interesting things here. I can sort, right, in these views and change stuff around, but I can also do things like group by. So you can see the differences that are coming in here, right? In this case, I have a bunch of, 7,000 devices coming in from a Clarity system, 2,000 devices coming in from an ARMA system, right? Because I have different, as you look at your enterprise, you're going to have different items coming in from those sources. And that's not the only place that information comes in, right? You definitely have a situation where you might end up creating stuff manually, stuff that's old and it's not on the wire, right? We still want to be able to bring that information in. There's a whole separate method through a specific Excel connector to bring in that kind of information as well, right? So there's a lot of power in being able to add all this kind of information here. What I want to do is I'm going to pop into one of these OT computers, and we're just going to pick, let's see here. Well, let's roll iPhones here. Here's a desktop down here. All right, so if I click in, if you notice, it pops up a nice little tab here. It's going to load a bunch of this information for me. So I can dive into the details when I need to go see what's going on, right? Do I have a specific function? Am I set at a particular Purdue level? Right, I can see information about the manufacturer, the asset record, what my OSs are, right? So stuff you would normally expect to see. I can also see things like a network adapter. I can see bits of software that are installed, all the sorts of information here. I can also see different things that have happened on this particular device over a period of time, right? So if I'm wondering if something's been going on, I can go check in on it. I can see what's going on there, right? Which is a lot of power. You can see and understand history at a moment's notice in a lot of these situations. So you get a lot of that value there. Some other stuff, right? We sort of talked a little bit about the idea that you have VR, the vulnerable items, right? So I can go look at all of the vulnerable items that are, the vulnerabilities that are out here. And you can get to this through multiple views, either in the main dashboard or down here, right? And I can click into one of these things, and this pulls up and gives me the detail information that it has, right? What the risk ratings are, a summary of what the issue is down here at the bottom, right? And so it gives you a lot of opportunity to understand the actual risks that are happening, as well as then prioritize what we want to try to do to make improvements and resolve these risks. And then similarly, as I showed a second ago, get that to come up, all right, we can see incidents as well. As Rob said, right, you have a belt break somewhere, brings down a line for a little bit of time, that's an incident, right? If we use the service management terminology, right? Incident is something that broke and we're going to fix it, right? It's, and commonly you think about it like, hey, I can't turn my power, it's a power issue, it's a physical issue, it's one of the very common situations, right? Maybe it's a breaker, maybe it's a bad power supply, all sorts of possibilities, right? But you can create incidents that only people with the OT roles can see. We can lock all of this down as well. So you have proper segmentation of responsibilities through roles and security, but only people who are associated with this factory can see it, along with one, a very handful of people up in the the CISA suite, right, over in your SecOps teams or some of your operations teams. But that individual factories just not having crosstalk between them, that someone's not in there editing the wrong records, and that sort of thing. So, there's a lot of opportunity in here, right? And then you can also, if we go into the equipment model view for a moment, right, you can see a breakdown of how all of these information and these lines associate themselves. I can see when I look at the battery assembly, right? If I look at the zone, I mean, I've got information about my, my child entities, right? And what do I have assigned into those, right? Oh, well, I have, I think this is like we go. Takes a minute to load, right? I can see the breakdown, what's coming in there, right? I can see if I've got incidents, if I have vulnerable items. This particular cell's got 145 assets associated to it, right? So we're building not only bringing in the raw data, but we're building relationships so that you can really begin to understand everything that's going on here, right? And there's a number of different ways to bring that in through a variety of service graph connectors. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But I think one of the things I just wanted to make sure I see right is using ServiceNow, right? Using things like the manufacturing workspace and the OT modules here give us different layers as we move forward through that journey, right? Visibility, right, into vulnerability response, into service management. The more of those we set up, the deeper we can go in being able to manage our environments. And that's really where the power of this platform comes into play, right? Is we're moving this to a unified system of record, and that really gives you that access to a powerful system of action, which is what ServiceNow is.
Hey, James, thank you. I mean, that is really cool to see the data coming from those discovery sources through the graph connector into the OT modules for ServiceNow. That's awesome. Hey, I'd like to take a step back and look at the bigger picture now that we've seen some of the tools. And this OT journey is important because it's important to understand because it seems very consistent across customers. And it's actually a Gartner slide. So like awareness, like it's out there, boards know, CISOs know, plant managers know that we've got a huge attack surface that maybe we haven't done as much to protect as we've done some other ones. So then we kind of get into the visibility space where maybe the organization's done some outreach. Maybe they have a discovery tool in place. And that's kind of where people are. And maybe they've ran that discovery tool for a couple of weeks and they've kind of had this, oh, wow moment. And there's a couple important elements to the, oh, wow moment. One is confirming the risk that the organization has. Like that's usually just comes home hard when they see that first shot of data coming in. But there's another, oh, wow moment about, oh, wow, there's a whole nother business as usual workload around OT that as an organization, we're going to have to manage. So it's not just the risk that's, oh, wow, it's also, what are we going to do about it? And then there's other phases in firefighting, kind of fixing the important things right now, and ultimately integration and optimization. And look, ServiceNow is built to help with every part of that. So the journey is important. And what we're going to talk about is some of the key value drivers for ServiceNow. And a lot of it we've already hit on, but let's maybe take a level up. And let me talk a minute about the fourth one in black on the right, the operational value from new OT workloads. Like that might be a little confusing because certainly the economic buyer in most cases for OT is the CISO. But just think about for a second, whose area is most impacted by this new workload? I mean, think about the plant manager. Her team is likely the one that's going to bear a lot of the work of not only keeping the data current, doing the patching, being impacted. And when we go to her, what are we going to say? And what's the reaction going to be? Is it going to be, oh, geez, here comes security or IT again, and they're going to give me some work. And yeah, I know we got to be secure, but how does that help me? Or is it going to be, I'm here alongside security because this data is going to help me drive my priorities in operations and manufacturing. And it's that push-pull between security and operations that if we can get that alignment in your organization, this becomes powerful because both sides of the coin start sponsoring each other. All right. So we talked a lot about the enterprise unified system of record. And look, no matter where you are in this journey, no matter what you're doing or thinking, if there's one thing I would ask you to take away from today, and I think this hypothesis is proven with several customers, I believe there's an imperative to get your OT data into ServiceNow and have the process and program in place to keep the data complete and trusted in a sustainable way. What I think we know is that this is going to be the foundation of your OT program, and you can't get those great rewards at the end if there's no foundation. And a big part of this is expanding the value of that hard-earned data across your whole organization. Because look, there's lots of stakeholders that are going to get value. It's not just one department. So And it has a cost. Managing and securing OT devices is going to have a cost. It's a whole new business as usual workload. And of course, right now, security is a priority, but don't you think that your organization is going to start looking for additional return on this workload? Putting the data in ServiceNow in the CMDB, that's going to enable that return on investment for your organization. So you think about the teams, security, manufacturing, those are easy ones that get value. But what about engineering? What about your asset manager, your safety manager? What about your compliance team, your production schedulers? Think about the broad benefits of having all that data in one system. When it's business as usual and you have an incident, outage, or breach, think about recovering from a non-security breach, a board failure. Wouldn't it be nice to immediately know that that's the problem, know exactly where it is? They can be hard to find. Trust me, I know. And then at the end of the day, you actually change the right one to get the line running again. Or heaven forbid, what if you actually have that breach? Those recoveries can be measured in weeks. How much time would a unified system of records save you? And I'm sure someone in your organization knows what's the cost of that. What's the cost of that in a minute, an hour, or a day? It's significant. So I also know that getting the data from your security discovery tool into ServiceNow, it's the relatively easy part. Look, we've created the graph connectors in ITS starting 2 or 3 years ago for almost all of the major security tools out there. Not all of them. We saw that in the demo. It works. It's proven in customers. It doesn't create technical debt. Yeah, there's some work to get the model set up correctly and do the testing that you do with any integrations. But look, that's where we have expertise, and that's where we've helped several customers. Okay, the next thing that people hit on is this idea about the idea of what ServiceNow can do with the data model, right? Look, there's tremendous value in the data model that ServiceNow has built into their manufacturing process manager. We call it the decoder ring, right? You can't do much with a list of assets from your discovery tool. But when you add this operational context, things that Rob talked about, locations, model, production center, you can take this data that's supporting security and you can use it to advance your operational priorities. Also, it sets a foundational element around how data is categorized across your enterprise. Remember the story about how Jerry went from one plant to another and he had to basically start over? Well, that's because they weren't following the ISO 95 location standard that ServiceNow supports. If you have standards across your organization and governance on how locations, models, and operational context is set up, then it makes those types of transitions much easier. It gives you the ability to enforce those standards too. They make sense to people. It also makes it also from an executive standpoint, how do you roll data up if it's not all in the same format? You know, think about automation. Think about your organization probably already has some sort of location model or risk model in SAP. You know, we can import that data and can automate the upkeep of a lot of those location records, which is a huge job and it can be managed in one place. It lets you create meaningful service maps across the whole organization that multiple people can understand. I mean, even if Jerry created a service map, if it wasn't done on the same governance or framework data model that it was in the other plant, nobody else in the organization can understand it. Look, location matters because these assets are widely distributed and we've all been in a factory. They're hard to find. They might be behind conduit or not logically organized. We talked a lot about mean time to remediation. It's also important this context that ServiceNow provides. Think about the people that actually have to work with the data. I mean, do you want to filter through a whole bunch of different lines to go get the data you need? No, we want an effective and efficient use of time. Process owners get directly to the information they need without sorting queries and spreadsheets. It's a better experience, which is an operational priority. Think about this. One of the milestones that a lot of teams want to reach is they'd like to get to routine patching of OT vulnerabilities. Look, This is where things can really start breaking down if you're not using a platform like ServiceNow. If we don't have our assets aligned to production, how are we going to schedule a change? I mean, are we going to shut down a whole building to patch an asset in production cell 5A? I know that sounds a little extreme, but walk through what the patch process and just the scheduling would look like on your floor. And then we'll circle back to this. And look, getting the contextual data, ServiceNow's made this easy with their modules. You know, they've taken care of the integration for you. We have to define our standards. We have to put governance in place. But again, that's something we can help with. So now we talked about this. We have unified data, and that data actually has context on the operations that the organization needs to make it used for. So how can we put that data to work? I mean, beyond security, I think tying back to that, oh boy moment when you realize this is a whole new workload, I don't see how you can manage this data any other way. I don't think people are getting a lot of extra budget or extra people to manage this workload. I'm not even sure they could find the people if they had to. I think it quickly becomes clear that we need something better than email or spreadsheets to manage its work. And look, this is what ServiceNow was built for. And the OT-centric security tools, they don't have advanced or mature workspaces. And that's not a knock on them in any way. It's not what they're designed for, right? This is really a symbiotic product with ServiceNow. They're really not designed to share information, do approvals or deferrals. They're really not designed to close the loop. Like, who closes a loop? How do you make sure consistent processes are being followed without the workflows that might be there in ServiceNow? And most only have things like email. So besides having multiple tools, managing them without service is a disaster from the perspective of TC, total cost of ownership, and that employee experience. Everybody in your organization is already trained on ServiceNow. That's how we exchange information, how we do approvals. So the bottom line, and I feel pretty strong, is that if you're not using ServiceNow as the single source of truth and this system of action, it's going to cost your organization more money, and you're going to get a worse experience across the board. So finally, I want to make the connection to operational priorities that we talked about. So it asks the question, how much of your operational process is defined by software connected assets? Robots, robotic controls, AC motors, stepper motors, valve actuators, sensors, PLCs, right? You name it. There's not many operations that aren't defined this way. James mentioned it, maybe Rob, how are we going to train new operators? We don't have our assets mapped. How are we going to organize a knowledge base? How are we going to troubleshoot? What about those SOPs that are on almost every line across the country? We can't do that. Let's go back to our simple example where we want to patch an OT asset. Well, when is this likely going to happen is the first question I would ask. So first of all, we better be coordinating with our production schedules and logistics folks. That's that unified system of action, right? Because that's going to be a two-way information flow. We're both changing that schedule all the time. We might want to share information with our tightly coupled supply chain partners as well. We're likely going to have some planning to do. In manufacturing, especially for critical assets, we're going to do pre-planning and we're going to have contingency planned. This is a lot more like field service management, even than an incident or a change. It's really like a mini project in manufacturing. Once we're prepared and we show it, what are we just going to announce to everybody on the manufacturing floor that we're clearing, clear out, we're patching cell 5A? That's not going to go over well. We're going to have to communicate with our maintenance team, engineering perhaps, and the line crew who's also going to be working on the line at that time. Again, unified system of action. What if they need that action that you want to patch to get their work done? What'll happen? I think Rob mentioned this, that asset is connected to a safety system they didn't know was offline. I mean, can you hear it? Can you see it? It's in a tight downtime window. I mean, without a system like ServiceNow, I mean, I can just hear the comments from the mechanics and line operators, like, what kind of circus are we operating here, right? Because it has to be so well coordinated. What if that system we're patching is related to a critical system? Say it's a controller connected to a valve on a tank of some really nasty stuff, like the stuff that if it gets out, the news team shows up at the plant. Data model will help you determine that. Maybe a safety person needs to be present. Maybe they need to conduct a safety acceptance test or audit on the patch system. Again, unified system of record, linking all these important functions together. Do you think maybe the manufacturing asset manager would want to know if we need to change out the entire robot to make it secure? Or are we just going to roll that in the back room for a couple of years? Look, it happens, right? And this is why putting it in the platform of platforms, ServiceNow, we can tie these things together. And just, I mean, what's the cost of that one robot getting lost in the shuffle? So look, this gets really complicated. So many teams are involved. It's crazy to say this, but IT patching is simple compared to this. The complexity is real. There's dozens of ancillary processes that we need to consider. And look, ServiceNow supports this type of work, not just with the OT, not just with the OT modules, but with the basic platform functionality. Think about the things we can do with low code, citizen developed creator workflows. And it can make all of this not easy, but at least manageable. So from my perspective, operations people should be insisting that ServiceNow is the unified system of record and the unified system of action for OT alongside security, but for manufacturing or operations, especially because they're going to be doing lots of work on OT. And if they don't do it in ServiceNow, how are they going to get the full benefit? How are they going to get their return out of this? They're going to get the security, and that's critical. But what about the other great stuff that's possible if we put ServiceNow at the center of our OT strategy? Listen, if you want to talk more about how to get started, make a case, or get alignment in your organization, how to get those parties together for mutual benefit, or how to get unstuck, take advantage of our insights session. Look, reach out to me directly. Come see me at Knowledge. I would love to have a discussion and see if my team can help. So thanks to everybody who helped pull this together. And thanks for everybody who got up this morning and listened in.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Hey, I'm going to open it up to the audience now. If you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and add those in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we will get those answered.
Someone's got to have a question, Rachel.
There is a question, and one of y'all can take it. So the question is, who have you seen in the organization that owns OT?
Well, I'll talk to the team too. It's a hot potato, right? No, it's I think it can be owned by different people in many organizations. It's owned by the CISO, and in some organizations, maybe it's owned by the operations or that plant manager, or in some cases, even IT might own it. The important thing is making sure that it's not just one team that owns it, that there's kind of that, 1 + 1 = 4 when we get multiple people involved in really thinking strategically about OT. I'd maybe go to Rob or Jamie. Have you guys seen the same thing?
We have, and I think more recently too, we're starting to see dedicated individuals in that post to be in charge of not only the control network, but obviously the security parameter around that one. That's a fairly new position popping up. Obviously, that rolls up to the CISO, but we're starting to see that a lot. And really, anybody just in charge of assets in general, right? That's a common theme that we're seeing. The same folks 5 years ago that were just in charge of quote unquote IT assets have now been told you're no longer in charge of IT assets. You're in charge of enterprise assets and enterprise security and that sort of thing. So we're starting to see that change. Jamie mentioned it, and everybody's mentioned it, that IT and OT convergence, but that's starting to become a more common theme.
Yeah, we're seeing that too. And, I think at the end of the day, these are enterprise workloads that we're talking about. And so it's always good to have that perspective.
So someone asked, do you have to have a discovery tool to make this work? And then does it matter which discovery or OT tool I have selected?
Yeah. Does someone want to take that?
Yeah, I can start. So, realistically, there are a number of existing service graph connectors out there that connect to, as we showed up on the slide, I think about 80% of the major names at present. My understanding is there's a few other ones that are in development. One of the benefits of those sorts of tools is a lot of them do have API calls. So even if we don't have service graph connector stuff ready for you guys out of the box, and some of those, a number of them, there's likely to be the capability to do some direct connect kind of behaviors. That's one of the things that ServiceNow is really strong at from that kind of perspective. Is being able to connect multiple data sources either through their pre-planned system or through the use of various API technologies.
Well, as we wrap up the Q&A section, I would like to thank our speakers, Jamie, Rob, Fritz, and James, for speaking today and providing their content on the topic of OT. Thank you all for joining our webinar. Have a great day.